burn your paper or things like that. You should also be putting your iron in and making sure it's hot. I have here just a wet paper towel to clean it. In the past, I've used like my jeans. They sell sponges for these that are nice, all kinds of things. If this iron is hot, it'll readily melt and smoke and put that solder on there. Now again, and I'm going to just work with them a smaller wire, even though these are plenty big for this tip. And so I'm going to try to join these two wires together. The first thing is to remove where you're making the joint, to remove the wires to redo the solder joint. And you have a couple different choices. These are kind of nice. I've had mixed things with these. You just put them in and squeeze it, and it automatically decides on. And so it strips it. That's probably a little longer than I want it to be. You want to keep those wires as clean as you can. These you have to spend a little bit more time and kind of figure out which one you want to go into. You want to put it in the size that you think it is. In this case, I think it's a 12 gauge. A 12 gauge. So I'm going to put it in there and squeeze it, rotate it a little bit, and then just pull it straight off. And the less damage you do here, the better. And the first thing you're going to want to do is probably tin these. And so if you're going to use heat shrink, something like this, you want to make sure you decide on the length you want, and you want to make sure that you cut it back. Now this might be too small for this, but you got to assume that, oh, this is a very good cutter. You got to assume that you're going to be only able to get to these two ends for soldering. So you've got to assume and get those on there well. And you want it quite a ways away from the actual wire here. First thing I'm going to do, I always do is tin. Now, some books like you to twist them. I don't like doing that with stranded, because with stranded, if you twist them up, you're actually going to weaken the wires and you're not going to get as much joint. So in general, I'm going to try to put them right next to each other like that. Now I may not be able to get that solder over it if I do that. And so to do this, I'm going to tin them first. It's nice to have a vise or a second hand. So I'm going to just gently squeeze these in here and hold this and tin it from doing that. So you have chemicals in here, you don't want stuff in your mouth. And so I'm going to call, this is called tinning it. I put my soldering iron on this side, and I put my solder on the other side. And if it's hot enough, it should run and melt. Now you can see this backed off a little bit, so that's not real good. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Oh, we got that one. Okay. So I think it's running down a little bit on these on the vise here. So put it, bend it that way would be better. Again, clean my tip, solder, go underneath, come up top, and wait for the wire to melt it. There you can see it just went just perfect. So I set that up a little better. Setup is important. Okay, and so I've got these tin. Again, I'm going to clean the tip. I'm going to put a lot of fresh solder on here. I've already got plenty on the wire, so I'm going to hold them next to each other. And it should start reflowing. Actually, I used too much there, so I need some more. So if you have a better setup than this, you can actually kind of, okay, once you're done, pull the iron, hold it still, cool it off, let it cool. You can blow on it or something or cool it. But now, forever, problem you're going to have with these joints is they'll work here and break on that side of it, right? And I should ideally be able to put my heat shrink over this, but this probably is a little small. I didn't have much selection. We won't have you do heat shrink. Anyway, and then we have a heat shrink gun to do this, and or you can use a barrel of this or a lighter or whatever you want to. Shrink that down, and you got a nice joint there. That won't ever be a problem. The other thing you should be aware of is that a lot of times when you use a crimp-on connector, you use a crimp-on connector like this, I usually put these in so that the wire is sticking out through there. take my crimper and pick the appropriate size. 22 to 10 would be the appropriate size here. And so I'm going to do the 22 to 10. There's a seam on top, so you want to crimp it where that seam is, so that the seam's the thing that breaks. And so now I've crimped that on there, and that's a good connection, but I can make that connection better pretty easily. And the way I do that with solder is simply, again, I'm going to get this not great vise here and put that on. And I'm going to actually add solder to this. And so it's going to have to get fairly hot to do this. And so I'm going to just put it there and let that get hot. And then as it gets hot, eventually, again, you can see now the wire's melting it. I'm not melting it with the tip of the iron. I'm melting it with the heat of the wire and the meat of the connector here. And when I've done that now, what I've done is I've improved that connection here and made it a better connection, and it will last longer and have less resistance.